Hey y'all, and welcome to the PreMed Voice, the podcast where your voice is heard. I'm your host, Peyton Smith, and today we have an awesome interview between Milan and Lauren about the CASPER assessment that some med schools are using and more are rolling out. So it's some great information. If you are in the same boat as me and not having even heard of CASPER before, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned. But without further ado, here is Milan and Lauren.
Turn it up, let's go. Let's go.
PreMed Voice. Today, I'd like to discuss the CASPER, which is an assessment tool used by the Medical School Admissions Committee as a part of your application. Today, I am joined by Lauren Kanzaki, who is a researcher at the University of California, Irvine.
Hey, Milan, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here today. So the CASPER is a computer-based assessment for sampling personal characteristics, and it's used by medical school admissions committees to see if you're a good fit for their school. Today, we'll have a Q&A by Lauren and I to give you more insight into this assessment. So the first question is, why is the CASPER assessment used in the medical school application process?
So, CASPER, like you just mentioned, is another way for the admissions committee to further analyze applicants through a more holistic approach. So, where they originally relied on your letters of recommendation to determine certain personal characteristics, they now use the CASPER exam to really kind of figure those out on their own.
Great. So how is the assessment scored? Can you give us some, like a brief background as to how medical school admissions committee members are actually interpreting the results as well?
Right. So, before I get into the scoring, I'll go into a little bit the details of the exam. So it's actually about a 90-minute exam. That's a combination of these video-based and word-based scenarios that include some sort of conflict or situation with 3 questions that you have 5 minutes to respond to. So each module is actually graded by a different test grader who has been trained to ignore any type of spelling or grammar mistakes. So they're really looking more at your content and your responses to these situations rather than how quickly you're able to type or any type of spelling mistakes, because you are limited to 5 minutes per each module. And so these scores from the independent reviewers are all added together to compile your own assessment of this exam. And those will be sent directly to the schools that you allow, and you will actually not be getting those back to view on your own.
Great. So it's kind of to see if you might be a good fit for their program, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So based off of your responses, they grade you and write down any type of personal characteristics they can deduce, and the medical schools will look into that to see how well that fits with their mission.
I see. Is that something that they will have in front of them if it's an open file review?
I believe it is something that they'll have with them. If you do make it to the secondaries or interviews, it's definitely a test that has been shown to determine a lot about a person's personal characteristics. So I know it's getting a lot more popular in using for reviewing applicants.
Great. And I've read recently, correct me if I'm wrong, that both allopathic and osteopathic medical schools are viewing this assessment tool, correct?
They do. So actually, when you do register for your exam, you'll be able to select which programs you're applying for. You'll even see that other healthcare professionals like physician assistants or nurse practitioners or other professions like that also do start to require the CASPER assessment. So you're seeing it used like pretty widely across the healthcare profession.
Wow. Okay. Wow. I definitely was not aware that it's used for other health professional programs, but that's great to know. So just a follow-up question. So I know you mentioned that you recently took the CASPER based on a conversation before this, but what was your interpretation of the exam, and how was your experience?
Yeah, so I took the CASPER exam last month, and overall I would say my experience went really smoothly. There's certain things you can do to make sure that your exam goes as smoothly as possible. One of them is to do the systems check that they have on the CASPER website. And what that's going to do is make sure that you have fast enough internet connection and no issues so that you won't have any technical difficulties during the actual exam. So I made sure to do that when I registered and also right before the exam. I also took their little mock exam that they have, which is 3 modules with some sample questions. And I did that back when I registered and then also right before I took my exam as a way to kind of just refresh my mind with the format and also calm any nerves going into it.
Okay, great. So if you were to advise prospective pre-med students or other health professional students, kind of on ways to prepare prior to taking the assessment, what would be your recommendations?
Yeah, so I didn't know much about CASPER until I found out that a few of my schools that I applied to actually required it submitted along with your secondary application. So I wasn't too familiar with it, and even if they haven't been planning for too long, they shouldn't be nervous. So research has actually shown that people's CASPER scores don't significantly change with multiple tests or prep courses. So you can rest assured that there's really not too much you can do to prep for the CASPER. But you do want to make sure that you're going into it knowing what to expect. So like I said, I took the practice exam twice just to be really familiar with the types of questions they ask in the format. And then I also prepared a little bit just like I would any interview. So just kind of thinking of certain conflicts and your responses to them and being able to verbalize that to another person is important, especially because this test is time sensitive.
Oh, absolutely. It definitely seems a little bit daunting, but I know when I get into the application cycle, I'll definitely take your recommendation. I think practice and kind of familiarizing yourself with some questions like you mentioned goes a long way.
Exactly. So just kind of getting yourself comfortable with responding to those types of situations quickly and effectively can make a big difference come your testing.
Absolutely. Great. So I have one more question here. So where can students, I guess, learn more about the CASPER exam? And then also, do you know exactly which schools use it, or is there a list, or where can they find that type of information?
Right. So any type of information that people want to gather about the CASPER exam, they should find directly on their website, which is takecasper.com. That's the one that you can go to see the practice exam and then also sign up for any exams. One thing I do want to make people aware of, which was new to me, is that the exam is offered only twice a month. And it also takes about a month for the scorers to completely review your test and send it off to your schools. So you want to make sure that you are taking this exam somewhat quickly in the application cycle, just so it doesn't delay your application from being reviewed further. And one thing that I found out afterwards is that you can take the exam earlier in the application cycle, like maybe May or June. And then even if you haven't completely narrowed down your list yet, you're able to add schools to send it to after you had taken your exam. And it only takes $10 to take the exam and $10 to send it to each school. You can look at the schools that you are applying to see if in the past they've required their students to take the CASPER exam, or it also shows every school which accepts it on the CASPER send to schools page. And so that's where you can really determine which schools are relevant for you to send it to.
Okay, great. So it costs $10 to submit it to each school, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that's not too much. I know the application process is pretty expensive, but this is kind of a small expense that could go a long way as part of your application.
Right. So it is, an additional cost, but definitely comes with adding a lot more to your application. And if you are someone who has received the fee assistance program, I would look into seeing if maybe you can get the CASPER fee waived. I believe that's something they actually might do.
Right. I like the point that you made that you want to take this assessment early, because applications early, then it's also important to take this assessment early so that everything can get processed and reviewed by the admissions committee, so you can be even granted a secondary and then an interview early in the application cycle.
Right, exactly. So I don't think that schools require you to take CASPER before they'll review you for secondary, but I have come across some schools that say my secondary will be reviewed once my CASPER and additional information has been uploaded. So definitely always great to set yourself up for the most success by finishing everything timely and early.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, and best wishes to you on your application, the rest of your secondary applications, and the rest of your med school journey.
Thanks, Milan. I wish you and everyone else the best in their CASPER exam, and keep working hard.
Amazing stuff right there from Milan and Lauren. Definitely information that all of us need to know as we prepare and prep ourselves to have the best chances to get into med school. I know that with this assessment, that's just one more tool that med schools are utilizing to make sure that they're getting the best students in there. So the more knowledge we have and the more preparation we can have for these kind of things is just awesome. So thank you guys so much for recording that. I really enjoyed it. I hope all of our listeners enjoyed it as well. Now for the announcements of the week, of course, don't forget to get onto PreMedSTAR.com. Great platform to connect with each other, interact with some doctors on there, some med schools on there, and with each other. Of course, just utilizing each other as tools to better ourselves and better our chances to get into med school, viewing it as more of a connection than competition as we all prep for med school applications. Of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate all the support that we've been getting so far, but definitely would love for you guys to share with your friends and family as well this podcast if you think it's as awesome as we hope you guys think it is. And then the last thing I have for you guys is if you would like to be featured on this podcast, please just email us at voice@premedstar.com and we'll get you all the great information you need to be a feature on here, just like Milan and Lauren are. So we hope that you guys enjoyed this week's episode. We hope that you're enjoying all the content that we've put on here so far. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to listen to us, and we'll see all of you guys next week.
Turn up. Let's go.